Who do you have to trade for in fantasy football, and who is it time to trade away? We'll go over all of that in this week's episode of the Fantasy Football Trade Desk. Now, as a reminder, this video will have just a few of my recommendations. You can click the link below, which will take you to my full article on the week, which will have even more fantasy football recommendations. We'll start with the bad news and go over my sells for this week, and we're going to start with a player I'm running a process on, which is when we explore the market to see how inflated the value of a particular player is. And so this week, I'm running a process on Miami Dolphins wide receiver Jaylen Waddle. Now, I know we're supposed to be really excited about rostering all parts of this Dolphins offense now that Tua Tagovailoa is under center. However, there are some concerning signs right now with Jaylen Waddle. In the 2 games since Tua has been back, the Dolphins have really seemed to not want him to take any hits, understandably so. So they're going to more of a quick-hitting passing attack, and that has led to an uptick in usage for Devon Achane out of the backfield and also for Jonnu Smith as the tight end. Now, in the past, it's been a little bit of a 2-horse offense for the Dolphins in terms of receivers. It's just Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. However, in the 2 weeks since Tua has been back, Waddle has actually seen a lower target share than both Devon Achane and Jonnu Smith. And while I don't know if that exact split in the target share is going to continue, it's pretty clear right now that Achane is going to be involved out of the backfield, and Jonnu Smith is going to be more involved as a tight end than we've seen from Dolphins tight ends in the past. Tyreek Hill can make plays in that short passing game because he can take any 5-yard pass and turn it into a huge gain. So his floor is going to be a little bit higher than Waddle, so I'm not as concerned about him. But I think you can maybe try to explore what the market is for Waddle if people are excited by Tua being back for the Dolphins. I would rather have receivers like Darnell Mooney or Cortland Sutton than Jaylen Waddle right now. I think if you are in a good spot with your wide receivers and can trade Waddle for any running backs like Ramondre Stevenson, Tyrone Tracy Jr., or even take a gamble on Panthers rookie running back Jonathan Brooks, who looks to be coming off the IR. Those are all trades that I would make for Waddle right now. We're going to have 3 kinds of buys today, and the first is to buy the dip on Houston Texans quarterback CJ Stroud. Stroud came into the season as one of the more hyped quarterbacks in fantasy, given his success as a rookie last year. However, he is currently the 16th ranked quarterback, averaging just 14.7 points per game. So fantasy managers may have already turned to somebody else, or they may be souring on the Texans quarterback. However, with Nico Collins on the verge of returning, I think that we might see an uptick in production from Stroud in the coming weeks. In the first 4 weeks when Collins was healthy, Stroud averaged 16.6 fantasy points per game, and while that isn't setting the world on fire, it's better than what he's doing right now, and 2 of those 4 games came against the Bears defense and the Vikings defense, who were playing elite fantasy defense and real-life defense in those first couple of weeks. The schedule coming up is much better for Stroud and the Texans. They face the Lions, the Cowboys, the Titans, and the Jaguars in the 4 weeks before the bye. The Titans are the best group in terms of fantasy production against quarterbacks. They give up the 19th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. However, the Lions give up the 16th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. The Cowboys give up the 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, and the Jaguars are the best matchup for fantasy quarterbacks. So we should see Stroud really go on a hot stretch for the next couple of weeks. So I would be looking to explore the opportunity of getting him on your roster right now. Before we get to the rest of the players I'm buying, make sure to pause this video and comment below. Let me know which players you're looking to trade for or trade away, or ask me any start-sit questions, and I'll get to those as the week goes on. The next recommendation is to buy a call on a player, which is when we look to acquire a low-cost share of a player who we think will have his value increase tremendously in the weeks ahead. So this week, we're going to buy a call on Carolina Panthers wide receiver Xavier Legette. I think there's still plenty of production to be had for Legette in the coming weeks. Bryce Young actually looked better this week against the Saints, and yes, some of that had to do with the Saints being a banged-up defense, but also Young is a young quarterback, and so it's understandable that he might continue to get better given more opportunities. Also, Legette was on the field an incredible amount with Deontay Johnson no longer in Carolina. He ran around on 93% of dropbacks. Yes, that led to just 4 catches for 33 yards, but he did have a touchdown to save his fantasy day, and it's important to know that he will be a red zone option if the Panthers get close. Legette has had a 22% target share and 34% of the team's air yards in the games this season that Deontay Johnson hasn't played. And so I think that Legette is going to continue to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense for the remaining weeks. If you're in a good spot At your running back position, you could trade Alexander Madison or Javonte Williams or a running back like that in order to get a low-cost share of Xavier Legette on your roster, because I think there will be some solid weeks coming up. The last trade recommendation is to buy high on Dallas Cowboys running back Rico Dowdle. With Dak Prescott headed to the IR and out for at least the next 4 weeks, I think the Cowboys are going to lean into the running game a little bit more, and that's good news for Rico Dowdle. That means I'm also buying into what we saw with him in Week 9. With Ezekiel Elliott inactive, Dowdle played on 73% of snaps. He handled 59% of the rushes and ran a route on 61% of the dropbacks, and that part is really crucial if the Cowboys are going to be trailing, but Dowdle is involved in the passing game. That's really going to raise his fantasy floor. In Week 9, he turned that into 12 carries for 75 yards rushing, but he also had 5 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown through the air. This is also his first game since the Cowboys bye week, since he missed last week with the flu. So this could be an indicator of what the Cowboys are trying to do, changing their offensive philosophy to get Dowdle more involved. Dalvin Cook hasn't shown anything. Ezekiel Elliott hasn't shown anything. The Cowboys need to see what they can get out of Dowdle. With Cooper Rush now going to be starting at quarterback, I think you're going to see Dowdle more in the running game, but I think also we've talked about that drop back participation rate. I think that Dowdle going to be used in the short passing game is going to be incredibly valuable for his fantasy production in the weeks ahead. According to Fantasy Calc, Dowdle has been traded this week straight up for Jacoby Myers, Isaiah Pacheco, and DeAndre Hopkins. I would do all of those trades, and I think a trade like DeAndre Hopkins would make some sense. Obviously, Hopkins was a low-cost asset during draft time, so he may just be a bench wide receiver for you. Coming off a huge Monday Night Football game, you might be able to trade DeAndre Hopkins for Dowdle, who I think is an RB2, and if you really need that production in your running back room, I think that's a pretty fair split, even though the Fantasy Life Trade Analyzer thinks that's a good value for Hopkins. I think with the running back situation the way it is this year, if you're really in trouble, that's a good spot for Dowdle for you. That's going to do it for this week of the Fantasy Football Trade Desk. As a reminder, click the link below to get my article with all of my trade recommendations. Like and subscribe to get this video and the rest of our football and fantasy football content over at NBC Sports, and I'll check you next week for another episode. Happy trading.